This presentation is going to provide a brief introduction to strings. There's a lot more about strings in C than shown here, but this gives you a little bit of knowledge to get started. So if we're going to use strings, we typically bring in a series of string handling functions that come from a header file called string.h. When we want to declare a string, it's declared like this. And this says it's an array of characters, and we'll be looking at arrays soon. Right now, in square brackets after the name of the variable, so this variable is called myString, you're going to put the maximum number of characters. And they use a special character at the end to mark the end. So although we asked for 25 characters, it actually only holds up to 24 because it needs one for this special marker at the end. If you want to initialize a string automatically, then what you can do is something like this. You can leave the size unspecified, and you specify a string constant by placing it in double quotes. So you can assign it a string constant, and it will automatically compute the length and store it for you. Now, a lot of people think that anytime they want to assign a string to a variable, they can just use the equal sign. But that's not the way it works. You can only do that on initialization. After that, you have to use things like string copy, which is a function from the library. We'll show that in a second. Stringlen is a function which returns the length of a string, or how many characters are stored in it. Now, the actual number of characters stored in a string may be very different than the declared size of it, because you may not have a string that long stored in there. You might have a shorter string. So stringlen will tell you exactly how many characters in it. So here I'm going to say my dog's name has %d characters, and I'm going to do a stringlen on the my variable, or the my dog variable, and it will calculate it and print out how many letters are in it. The general way to assign one string to another is to use string copy. And it copies the second parameter, which in this case is a string constant, to the first parameter, which is a variable. This is a standard direction that all these functions work in. They copy the second to the first. It's kind of like an assignment statement where the value on the right is copied to the value on the left. So that's going to assign to my string, which was initially set to be just empty, my dog. Now, I can append onto that and put in the name of my dog, which is stored in that variable. So now it'll say my dog followed by the name of it, because string cat will append it onto the end of the existing value inside my string. Finally, I can use string cat again and say runs fast, putting that on the end of that string. Finally, I print out the entire string using the format code %s, which knows how to print a string properly. The final thing we want to look at is string comparison, which is strcmp, and this works in a rather unusual manner. You give it two values. Here I'm comparing my dog's name to the name Killer, and I'm going to print out my dog is Killer or my dog is not Killer, depending on what my dog's name is. And what I do is I say if 0 equals string compare my dog and Killer. Now, if they're equal, it's going to return 0. If it returns a negative number, that means that the first parameter is alphabetically less than the second parameter. And if it returns a value greater than 0, it means the first one is alphabetically greater than the second. A lot of people think, oh, it's going to return -1 if it's less. No, it may not be -1, it is just negative. Similarly, it's not going to return 1 if it's greater than. It'll return some value greater than 0. We don't know that it's 1. In fact, most likely it is not 1. It is some value greater than 0. So you can actually do sorts based on alphabetical order using these comparisons, but most of the time we just look for equality. So let's run this and see how it works. And there's our output. So when we calculate the name of my dog, the number of characters in it, it's 5 characters as calculated by string length. My dog Rover runs fast is the string in my string that was assembled by putting my dog, concatenating my dog's name, and then concatenating runs fast, all into one variable. By putting the pieces together using string cat, which adds on one after the other. And then the result of string comparison is it says my dog is not killer, because when I did the string compare, it returned a non-zero value. So that's it. A very quick introduction to how you do some really basic things with strings.